Thinking. Hi there, everybody. I'm Naomi, and I'm here today with Anna Maria Pinter, and we're talking about how online gaming affects our learners. This is based on some research Anna Maria and her team did, titled "Language Learning in the Wild: Children Playing Online Games in English." So, hello, everybody. Welcome. First, a little bit about Anna Maria. She's a professor at the Department of Applied Linguistics at the University of Warwick in the UK, and she's very widely published in the area of teaching English for young learners. Her interests include task-based learning with young learners, using inclusive research methods in research with children, technology-mediated learning, and language teaching education. So, hi, Anna Marie. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about the research you carried out?
Of course, yes. Thank you very much, Naomi, for this kind introduction. Welcome, everyone. First of all, before I start, I would like to acknowledge my team because this research has been done as a team effort. So other than myself, Yuko Butler from the US, Helen Sherwin from Hungary, who collected data from Hungary, Pia Tabali, who collected data from Chile, Rama Matthew, who collected data from India, and Xiaolin Peng collected data from China. So I'm very grateful to my team, and unfortunately they can't all be here today, but a couple of them might be in the audience. So if they're there, big hello, and please make yourselves known and get involved. So just a little bit about the research. Gaming, of course, is very, very popular. There's quite a bit of research about older learners, much less about younger ones. And the research that exists about younger learners shows that children benefit by learning vocabulary in the main. Boys play more than girls. And in some countries, especially in the north, in Scandinavia, it's very well known and quite well documented that children do a lot of this outside their classroom. So we started this research with the question, what if we looked at this in other countries, a range of countries like Hungary, India, Chile, China, not just in the northern countries. And what if we explore this from the children's point of view? We wanted to know, what do the children themselves tell us about gaming in English outside class? Why do they do it? How much do they do it? What do they think they benefit from it? Because this sort of information hasn't really been documented at all. So for this question, we needed a very different methodology from what you read about in the literature in the main. Because to be able to get to the children and to understand what they're doing, we needed to work with them more intensively. We had to have repeated discussions and conversation. We had to build trust, and we had to trust them that they're showing us and telling us from their point of view what's important. So if I can put it this way, we were, rather than focusing on our own questions, we were actually focusing on what the children wanted to tell us. So there was a survey given to hundreds of children in all these contexts. And then in the second part, we had these kind of interesting conversations, intensive conversations with those children who played a lot and who were enthusiastic gamers. So I don't know whether, Naomi, I'm allowed to go into what we found, or shall I take a pause here for perhaps?
Absolutely. I mean, it'd be lovely to hear from the audience. Do your students ever talk about the gaming they do outside of class? Do you know if your students are playing games outside of class? We'd love to hear that. And while you're replying there, Anna Marie, yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about what the children told you about their gaming, that would be fantastic.
Sure, yeah. So in all these contexts, we were a little bit surprised. We found that children play a massive amount outside class. They play all kinds of games. They play hundreds and hundreds of games. When we tried to tally all the names of the different games, there were a lot in common, but there were new names of games popping up all the time. Children actually are very keen on explaining, or were very keen on explaining to us the rules of the games. They were terribly eloquent in explaining the games to us. They were talking very convincingly about strategies that they use when they play. They're very aware that they are developing their creativity and problem solving, as well as their English. And a lot of children play as soon as they go home from school with their schoolmates. This is a way of hanging out and being together, playing familiar games together. A lot of children also play with family members, older siblings, cousins. And we found that a lot of children also play with people they meet online. So other children from other countries. For example, in Hungary, people mentioned playing with children from Slovakia, from Romania, but also from much further away, from people in South Korea, for example. Children increasingly told us that they see gaming and learning English this way as a very authentic way of learning, and they compared this to the more rigid traditional way of learning in class. Some of them talked about developing what we called in the paper their digital pragmatics, meaning their knowledge and skill that they need navigating the game world online. They were, for example, asking for advice from other children in the gaming community. They were watching YouTube videos to learn about how to get better at games. And they were talking to us very convincingly about their heightened awareness as to the disadvantages of gaming as well. So they were very aware that gaming endlessly into the night every single day is not good for you. And they were talking about strategies and techniques they were using to try and keep their own gaming within certain limits. We found that there was an overlap between learning and having fun. In fact, the two were intertwined very closely together. Children said that when it's fun and entertainment, you almost don't notice that you're also learning. What we also found that other than English outside classrooms, in a lot of countries, other languages come into it as well. So, for example, in Chile, lots of the game consoles and instructions for games come in Spanish, not because of, in Portuguese or in Spanish as well. And this means that children actually play sometimes using 3 languages, and they navigate these multilingual interactions very naturally. In China, we found that quite a lot of games are now available in the first language, so children are actually not necessarily playing in English. Also in China, of course, there's a new policy that primary school children, they're trying to limit the amount of extra English learning outside class for primary school children. So because of that, both parents, teachers, are very aware of this. So they sort of putting very strict limits on how much children can play. So each context is different. The affordances and the challenges are different. But what we did find, though, was that many children, many more than we expected, do play and are extremely accomplished players who can explain and show us exactly what they do and why they do it.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting. So everyone in the audience, we've got a great audience here. We've got Nadia, we've got Emilia, we've got Gifty, Jane, Nikita, Puma, Lily, Nonna, everyone welcome. It's great to have you all here. We'd be really interested to hear if any of your students are playing games in English, and do you ever get them to talk to you about English in their game, talk about their games in English? Okay, we have a comment here from Nadia saying that her boy expresses himself in English. And she mentions that her boy loves Roblox games. That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, so that's great. I actually started this project myself as a non-gamer. I'm not a gamer myself, but I was just very interested in this whole phenomenon. And actually, some children that I talked to and I worked with briefly introduced me to Roblox. In particular, within Roblox, a game called Brookhaven. I don't know how many of you in the audience are familiar with Brookhaven, but it is the case that children, if they're enjoying it, if they're motivated to play, then they will be picking up the phrases, the words. And in Brookhaven, for example, what you do is you move around in an imaginary city. You go into places like schools and hospitals and restaurants, and you meet friends, and you dress up and you make appointments, and it gives you so many opportunities to pick up new words and to practice new words if you're enjoying the game. So I can certainly understand and see why somebody would want to immerse themselves in that world and use English that they picked up there. We had some students in Hungary in particular who were telling the researcher that their English learning outside the classroom using games and talking to the gaming community was much more influential in their English development than the English classes that they were getting at school. And obviously this is not happening everywhere, and it won't happen everywhere. But I think there are pockets of this kind of very intense engagement with very clear advantages for language learning.
Definitely. That actually makes me think of Jane's comment here. She mentions how there's lots of functional language and grammar points that we can teach if we take advantage of this gaming context. So I guess that's talking about more bringing the games into the classroom. Yeah. Anna Maria, did any of your research look at how teachers can bring these games into the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our main focus in this study was on the children, but we did also ask teachers about gaming and then about use of games in the classroom. And again, we found a huge variety. So some teachers know very little, close to nothing about games, and they're not interested. Some teachers know about games. In fact, some of them are gamers. I mean, there is a generation out there now, I think, who grew up with this kind of entertainment as in their childhood. So there are teachers who are gamers themselves, but still they haven't really seriously thought about connecting their experience into classroom practice. And then there were teachers who were very interested, who had anecdotal evidence that some of their children were playing games, but they didn't really know much about it. So I guess if I can talk about it a little bit, our conclusion and our discussion in the paper that has just been published by the British Council is that we think there are some very interesting bridges that teachers can build between what children do outside the classroom and what happens in the classroom. So, of course, gaming is just one thing that children might do in English outside the classroom. There might be many other things like listening to music or other sort of online activity that doesn't necessarily fall into the category of gaming. So we very much concentrated on gaming, but this applies to everything else as well. So we said that in the report that we said it would be a good idea for probably every teacher to have these conversations with their learners. How do you use English outside the classroom? Do you play games? Just to get an understanding, first of all. And then if teachers themselves are gamers, I wonder what games they used for their own language learning, perhaps, and what lessons they can draw from that, and how can they connect that to the classroom. And then in the report, we sort of have a list of ideas and activities for teachers who teach younger and perhaps lower proficiency students, and also for teachers who teach slightly older young learners who are perhaps able to do a little bit more in terms of their proficiency. So just to flag up some of these ideas, we thought that even with children who would play something like Brookhaven in Roblox, something fairly simple and easy to navigate, it might be an interesting activity just to get the children to bring a screenshot from their game, when their favorite room or their favorite part of the city, the imaginary city, bring it to class, and then organize an activity where they can draw and describe or ask questions about the pictures. If you've got many learners bringing in many of these, obviously that leads to a different activity as opposed to if you've just got one. If you've just got one picture, you can put it up on the board and organize some kind of an activity with the whole class. If you've got many pictures, you can make it into some kind of group work or pair work. But you could also organize very simple survey activities like which games do you play, who do you play with, how long do you play for, and then one class can interview another class in your school and draw up a little report about the gaming activities of a particular class. At higher levels, we think it's possible to do mini presentations in English about how you play your game and what strategies you use, because we saw how enthusiastically the children were able to talk about this. You could get the children to try and design their own games or their own apps. They'll be full of ideas and they'll have some very imaginative thoughts. For example, children suggested to us a very well-known game, Minecraft, should be used for teaching things like art and design vocabulary and phrases. And yes, it could be, if only, a teacher could think of it and implement it. So our idea was always inform yourself what the children are doing in your particular class, what games they're playing, and use that as an inspiration. And maybe you need to add an extra step to make it linguistically more useful in the classroom, but certainly describing, ranking, talking about games, introducing other children to games that some play in the classroom would all be good activities. Or even just something simple like bring words or phrases from the game you play and let's add those to the word wall in the classroom for people, other people in the class to learn it.
Those are some great ideas. Thank you so much, Anna Maria. Now, I think that there's a couple of teachers have touched on this here. Talking about not just online games. Gifty here mentioned how incorporating local games that pupils are already familiar with can enhance teaching and learning. In Ghana, game plays an essential role in the curriculum, making them an effective method for developing English skills. And how do you think the online games and traditional games tie together?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that question. And this is a very important question, because obviously we can't just assume readily that online games will be available to everybody everywhere. And games and gamification goes well beyond online games. We looked into online games because we knew it was prevalent, and we knew that we would get very interesting data, which we did. But yes, in some contexts, perhaps it's not possible. Perhaps there's no internet, or not enough devices, or for whatever reason, children haven't got the access at all to those devices and the games. So gamification with just very simple, pen and pencil and paper materials is also possible. I mean, the principles in many ways are the same. So, if you want to turn in an activity into a game, you may want to think about making it competitive one way or another between groups, maybe. Think about whether you can include some point scoring into the activity. You need to establish very clear rules of play. And you need to make sure that the activity or the game you've created is really fun for the children. If it's not fun for the children, it's not going to stick. They're not going to enjoy it. They will still see it as an exercise. So I think that's very important. And sometimes what we imagine to be an exciting game may not be an exciting game. And the opposite is true. Sometimes we look at something and think, oh gosh, this looks tedious to me. And actually, children in a certain context of a certain age may just enjoy it. I think it's very important to play it again and again, especially if children enjoy it, because the repetitive nature of games is helping a lot with the language learning process. If it's an online game, you get immediate feedback that is often recorded, so you can kind of go back and see what was said or what was written on the screen. But even in, I think, paper and pencil games in the classroom, you can pause and you can think about, what you want to do again, or what you want to, do better when you play the game again. So there is a very good psychological moment for correcting yourself, or correcting the group, or keeping an eye on each other's errors, especially, for example, if the game is about, correctness in English in some way. Games offer active learning, so everyone will be excited and everyone will want to contribute, and everyone hopefully will be motivated. And these are the major ingredients of good learning experiences. And if children are playing something in pairs and they are at different levels, games are also very good because they can be played at the learner's own pace. So a pair at the top of the classroom might be going much faster than another pair somewhere else. And that's okay, as long as, obviously, the children are mixed together for various activities in different ways. But while you're playing with your partner, you're going at your own pace. So, yeah, thank you very much for that comment. I think that's very relevant. Gaming can happen online, but offline as well, of course.
I think one thing a couple of people in the audience have mentioned are some of the slightly more negative effects that online gaming might have. For example, here, Mercedes mentioned how online game is affecting some of her students' performance and their participation in classroom. Did that come out in the research at all, Anna Maria?
Yeah, so there are a few things here I think that our research wasn't really focused on. One is, and I must mention this, one is, of course, online safety issues, who the children play with, who supervises them, how many of them play into, the early hours of the morning, for example. So this is a serious question, and of course it's very important. It's just that our study wasn't about this. But yes, I mean, certain rules and certain guidelines need to be in place. and parents as well, they have a responsibility. I mean, from a teacher's point of view, a teacher could just completely ignore if children are playing in their own time. But I think it might be a good idea for the teacher, as I said before, to have those conversations and to have some idea who's playing and what they're playing. And when the children notice that a teacher is genuinely interested and asks about it regularly and makes an effort to take an interest in it, then there's a better chance that they will tell you more. And as a teacher, if you suspect there is a problem in the background, then it is your duty and responsibility to look more into the situation. So for example, if someone is being abused online, like you get a whiff of that, obviously as an adult you need to act immediately. But in terms of they're not paying attention anymore to what's happening in class and then they're just playing online, I think this is where the bridge building might be useful, even if you allow them just to show a little bit of what they do, just like the screenshot idea, or whenever they're doing something in the English class, if they are invited or allowed to choose a character for their story, for example, that comes from a game, because some of them are really quite interested in those, heroes and different kind of characters that they enjoy working with. So even if in a very small way you can bring a little bit of the gaming world into the classroom, I think this barrier might be bridged. Of course, there might be other issues. There might be issues about levels of proficiency. Like in Hungary, we did see that those students were simply bored in the ordinary lessons because their proficiency level was so much higher than the rest of the class. So the teacher needs to interfere and intervene in a very different way there. But yeah, it depends kind of what strategies you might want to use to somehow bridge this gap.
That's really interesting, and that's particularly interesting about how actually it had improved some students' level to such a degree that they were ahead of the rest of the class. That's really interesting. Teresita here also mentions some of the other benefits of gaming. So she says, as a 21st century language educator, online gaming can establish collaborative teamwork, leadership, problem solving, and creative thinking skills with various interactive classroom activities. Did you find that out in the research as well?
Yes. Yeah. So thanks for that. That's an interesting statement and very impressive, I must say. I mean, our research, of course, was about gaming in the wild. So it was focused totally outside the classroom. So the kind of discussion points and implications that we talk about in our report, they are really just ideas for teachers to entertain and try out. They're not really ideas that we ourselves observed or tried in classrooms. Because like I said, our research was firmly about gaming in the wild. But I guess, yes, there are very interesting initiatives and materials out there for incorporating online work in classrooms and games. Of course, you need a very good technological and technical support and background for this. And then it's difficult to find the right game, for the purposes that you need. But it is a way forward, and it is something that an area, I guess, where more and more ideas, more and more materials are likely to become available. So my comfort zone would be to start with exploring what the children already do and try to bring that into a more traditional classroom to spice up my traditional teaching routine. I think it's a much bigger step to start working with tablet devices, give a tablet device to everyone in your class, and then go on to some kind of a game or activity that has been well chosen for the purpose of that class. But that happens as well. There are colleagues out there who work with activities and games that can be used in classrooms as well. And of course, this also depends what your school can afford and what kind of hardware and software you've got at your disposal. But yeah, certainly it's a very, very interesting area. And I think, taking small steps is important. Find a game that excites you think would work, and think of how would this fit with everything else that you're trying to do in the next couple of weeks and months, and just try it and see what aspect of it and how much does it work according to what you thought would happen.
Gosh, yeah, that's really, really interesting. Thank you. So when you were talking to the children, did any of them say that they felt like their teamwork was improving when they play online, or were they talking more about their English skills?
Yeah, no, they mentioned a lot of other things, not just English skills. So teamwork, but also creativity, problem solving. They also really, they talked a lot about sort of emotional things, controlling their emotions, for example. Like a lot of them talked about how annoying it is when you don't win, or how annoying it is when you don't get the number of points you need, and then you die, and then you have to start all over. So this sort of self-control and controlling emotions and metacognitive skills and a whole lot of different things that they very clearly talked about. But with the language as well, they were able to say, yes, I read it on the screen, I look up something if I don't understand, I learned a lot of words, I also try and talk to the people. I mean, of course, a lot of things are not spoken, but read and written on screen. So a lot of them mentioned typing and spelling as important things that they feel they're improving all the time. Yeah, so they were talking about a range of different benefits.
That's fantastic. It's really fascinating research. I highly recommend, if anyone out there hasn't actually read it yet, you can read the full paper on the British Council website. I believe Karen will pop it in the comments. I think she might have already put it in there. Otherwise, I'm sure she'll pop it in there again. But I'm afraid we're actually running out of time now. Thank you ever so much for talking to us today, Anna Maria. That was really fascinating. And I think our audience all found that really, really interesting as well. We had some great comments today. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Anna Maria.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for taking the time. And I hope you will enjoy the report. And thank you to Naomi for moderating the session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.